University, and I want to welcome you to the Boston Globe Suffolk University Political Happy Hour. I am honored this evening to welcome to the Suffolk University campus the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Maura Healey. Maura Healey is the senior partner in what she calls the People's Law Firm. And she takes that very seriously. She has waded into issues that are important to us. She has taken on the heroin epidemic. She continually fights discrimination. And for those of us in the education industry, she has had the courage to stand up to the predatory for-profit colleges. We are grateful for what she does for us every day, and we are proud to call her our Attorney General. I would like to turn the stage over now to Josh Miller from the Globe and the Commonwealth's Attorney General, Maura Healey.
Thank you, President McKenna. I'm so happy to be here with all of you at Suffolk University, with everyone who's joining us on our live stream at bostonglobe.com. I hope you'll sign up for the newsletter from which this event takes its name, Political Happy Hour, at bostonglobe.com/political happy hour. But most of all, I'm so thrilled to have the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Maura T. Healey, with us here tonight.
Thanks, Josh. Great to be here.
It's great to be here with
Our
you.
neighbor. We're so happy to have you all, Suffolk University. This beautiful building. It's my first time in it. We work right next door. Come visit. Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks. It's great. I hope I don't fall out of the chair. I'm short. So I struggle with the placement sometimes.
I'll do my best not to
Okay.
fall out of this chair. You do your best not to fall into that one. This is a happy hour. What do you usually drink?
It depends what time of day.
In the evening time.
In the evenings are long in my world, in my space. So it varies. But you've got water. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's a very exciting beverage.
I'll drink that.
But is there a drink you kick back, relax when you go home? You're finally done with work?
God! Anybody who knows me knows that my alcoholic beverage drink of choice is beer. Typically Harpoon IPA, but beyond that, I'm not particularly fancy.
And since you took office at the end of January, have you had any time to sit back and relax with your partner, with friends?
Thank God. I thought you were going to ask me how many beers I've drunk since then. A few. Look, it's a great job. I love this job so much, and I'd like to think I'm working hard. I know folks in my office are working really hard, but I also know that for me to be effective, of course, you need to make the time for your family and friends. It's hard. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for so many of us in today's busy world, but it's important, I think, for everybody's sanity that happens. So this weekend, I was celebrating my nephew's 4-year-old birthday party. We had it over at Sky Zone, and I literally found myself on a trampoline. I was so glad nobody noticed who I was. But I took to a trampoline this weekend. So you find your ways to get away. Yeah,
I mean, besides trampolining, do you have any other, and a Harpoon, do you have any other vices you use to relax? Lousy TV shows, junk food, e-cigarettes?
I have a lot of vices. I don't know how many I want to reveal here. I'll tell you, as you might imagine, for about a year and a half of my life, I sort of checked out on a lot. So much so, I didn't even realize I was watching last night the Astros-Yankees game and did not even know that the Astros had moved to the American League. That happened somewhere during the course of my campaign the last 2 years, but it shows that I just had some catching up on to do. So some of those series that people watch, I'm now starting to tune into. That
Like
are
what?
old news. Like Orange is the New Black, Breaking Bad. I mean, Homeland, like old stuff. Everybody's, seen and done that, but I'm still getting caught up. So I unwind with some of that.
Yeah. Do you, besides spending time with your friends and family, do you belong to any social groups, singing club, bowling league?
Definitely not.
No. The Attorney General's office is your social club?
I don't. Well, that's such a nice way of putting it. The People's Law Firm, the social club. The fact of the matter is, I have very little skills or capacity in any number of realms. So I've not been invited to participate in such clubs or leagues.
All right. The People's Law Firm Social Club. That has a nice ring to it. I want to turn to some recent news. Federal prosecutors alleged last week that some members of a local Teamsters union, including the local secretary-treasurer, who opposed the use of non-union workers on the television show Top Chef, were involved in an extortion scheme. The state Republican Party has called on you to return campaign cash you've received from Teamsters Local 25. Will you?
No.
Why not?
And, well, look, I think you got to sort of look at it for what it is. These are allegations. They're serious allegations, and I denounce the alleged conduct, certainly, particularly as a civil rights lawyer. If any of this turns out to be true, I denounce that kind of conduct vehemently. That said, it's important to look at sort of what this is, and these are allegations made against 4 members of an organization, and so I think it's important to separate that. And Teamsters, to be specific about Teamsters, I'll tell you a little bit about Teamsters. Teamsters was a union and organization that has long stood to support working men and women and their families in this state. They actually were the union, I think the only union to endorse 3 women in the Democratic primary for constitutional office, which I think says something about where they are on women and equality. And I've worked with them on issues relating to children with disabilities. They do an awful lot in our communities and across the state to work on behalf of children with disabilities. So that's where I am on that issue.
I mean, I think the GOP's effort is obviously political. You're a Democrat.
Really?
Really? Shocking.
I'm new to this, Josh, this business still.
Surprise!
Yeah.
But I think that their underlying their call for you to return the money is that you're in a sensitive position as Attorney General. Your office could end up investigating the Teamsters, and having gotten money from them could create the appearance of something unseemly, at least according to your political opponents. What's your response to that?
Well, I think those are a lot of dots to string together, and I basically stand by what I just said to you. I think it's important to separate sort of the facts from what's alleged here, and also that let me just say, of course, to the extent there is any appearance of conflict with anything that my office is doing, I know how important it is to address that and to take every step possible to make sure there isn't not just a conflict, but also the appearance of conflict.
Right.
So I take that really seriously and hope to always act in responsible ways.
Just one more question on this. You're at least have the appearance of being particularly close with the Teamsters. If I'm not mistaken, they were the first and only union to endorse you in the primary. Is that right?
You might remember I had a little trouble with labor in my primary for understandable reasons, but the Teamsters were the first union to support me. They supported Martha Coakley. They supported Deb Goldberg. Again, a few of those were contested Democratic primaries, but they were willing to come out and support women who were running against male opponents in those primary races. And yes, I live in Charlestown, so I'm literally close to them because they're, probably all of a mile down the other end of the neighborhood.
Yeah, and there's also a photograph on your campaign website, picture of you with a caption, "Riding with Teamsters Local 25," where you appear on a motorcycle wearing a jacket with the union's logo on it. So given those 3 things, how do you sort of dispel any appearance of closeness to them or show your impartiality?
I couldn't turn down and sitting on a Harley. Are you kidding me? Look, I don't know how many thousands of pictures there are with me with any number of folks. I took a lot of pictures during the course of the last couple of years, so I don't think people would judge by that. But look, as I say, I stand by the values of labor unions. I stand by what this particular union has been about and has been fighting for. And that's what it is. So.
All right. I want to ask you about something that's been in the news lately, and that is DraftKings and FanDuel and other fantasy sports sites. Should people who use those websites be worried they're breaking the law?
Well, this is such a fascinating industry. It's a new industry. It's a growing industry. It's an industry that's taken off here in Massachusetts and really across the country. For those of us who watch Sunday football, we see that there is a real push in this area. What we do know, because we did look at this in the office after they reached out to us, which is not uncommon when any new company comes to town or new industry, they'll reach out and want to talk about their industry. So we sat down with them. There's no there's no federal or state law that prohibits daily fantasy sports. I will tell you that this week's revelations about potential insider trading are concerning. I think that those who play want to be and expect to be assured a level playing field, and I think that particularly as somebody who cares about consumer protections, I think it's really important to make sure that is in place. So we've reached back out to them, to both DraftKings and FanDuel, to invite them into the office to talk to us about the kind of steps they're going to be taking to protect consumers. I know that today they've determined, and as a matter of policy, they're not going to let their own employees bet. I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense to a lot of us out there. But we'll look forward to more discussions.
And what's the sort of status of how your office is looking into this? Is it just discussions? Is there a more sort of substantial inquiry? Is there a criminal inquiry? How would you characterize it?
Oh, no, there's no criminal inquiry. And as I said, there's no federal or state law that prohibits daily fantasy sports. But, at their initiation, they reached out to us to talk about who they are and what they do. And so we took the meeting, and I think that's right. That's responsible. Again, concerning revelations this week, and I think we want to make sure that consumers have a level playing field. And obviously, maybe it's because they're a new industry and didn't create the kind of policies and practices that you want to have in place as you grow to make sure that consumers aren't being taken advantage of or aren't duped. For whatever the reason, the point now is let's get it right and let's make sure that we have in place the right policies and practices going forward.
So for people in Boston and around the United States who use those websites, they can feel 100% safe that they're not breaking the law?
Oh, that they're not breaking
That they're
that.
not breaking
Of
that?
course.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not looking to shut them down. But I do think it's right that people are a little bit miffed today and this week with the revelations that, that they were literally playing against the House. And not surprisingly, the House made out pretty well in this instance. So I think that what those who participate are looking for and should be assured from these industries is that there is a level playing field for those who want to participate.
And that's really what you're looking at most closely? Was that fair to
Yes,
characterize?
yeah, absolutely.
I want to turn to another topic. You were outspoken opponent of casino gambling in the state when the matter came before voters on the ballot last year. Why were voters wrong to give it the green light?
Well, I think that my view on casinos has been about the concerns I have about gaming and gambling and problem gambling and addiction, and also the concerns that I had about looking around the country and the region and market saturation and what does Atlantic City look like now as compared to 10 years ago, and what are we really signing up for? Obviously an issue that was hotly debated in the legislature, and I think years ago at its inception it was intended as an economic driver. And I understand that. At the end of the day, my view is sort of irrelevant. The voters decided. I think my job as Attorney General is to make sure that the law is enforced. That's why we have a gaming division that was created under the law to make sure there isn't any funny business there. It's also, though, I think to make sure that casino operators are held to the commitments that they've made to the states, that they've made to their host communities, and that consumers are protected. So, that's the kind of work that we're about doing here in the Office of the Attorney General on this issue.
As Attorney General, you asked for the delay of the state's consideration of a crucial environmental permit for Wynn Everett, the big casino that's being planned in Everett. And you repeatedly expressed concern about traffic in Charlestown. Can you explain sort of how those transportation worries fell under your purview as Attorney General and what you were thinking in sending those letters?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we do in the Office of the Attorney General is we have an Environmental Protection Division, and they're routinely charged with looking at matters that come before MEPA when it comes to applications for certain permits and the like. And so, I'll tell you where I was coming from on this particular issue. There was a MEPA process underway there, and my concern, I think our office's concern, is that as standard part of any MEPA review that's done, you look at things like What are the impacts of traffic and increased traffic going to be as a result of a project? And what are the necessary mitigation measures you want to build in to address those problems? And that's consistent, that's standard in terms of the analysis and the review. And our position, my position was, look, when you're talking about that particular area, highly congested, 93 major corridor here for commerce and work and our economy into and out of Boston. It's a very problematic traffic area as is. My only call was, let's get this right and let's make sure that we've got a traffic solution in place as this goes forward so that this can actually work. The good news, though, I was our invitation to delay and get that process baked before issuance of the permit was rebuffed. I'm glad about where we ended up, which is essentially what the administration did, is they said, we're going to issue the permit, but we're going to, first off, create a regional working group to address a solution for that area. That's really important. I think all stakeholders need to participate in that, because we ought to get a solution that works for that region and that area. And also, there are a lot of conditions that the casino developer will need to meet as this goes forward, which will hopefully address the very traffic concerns that we were raising. So we look forward to participating in the process to the extent we can be constructive.
I think given your opposition to casino gambling, this is something people have been wondering. Can you see a scenario in which you, in your official capacity as Attorney General of the Commonwealth, would file a lawsuit in a way that would effectively slow or stop the Wynn Everett project from going forward?
No, I mean, I can't imagine that. I think that our job, Josh, is to make sure that that as this goes forward, there's compliance with relevant laws and relevant regulations, and that's what we'll look to make sure happens out of the office.
Since you became Attorney General in January, have you spoken with Steve Wynn?
I have a few times. Yeah.
What about?
Well, Steve's pretty sharp and direct and to the point. So we talked a few times. We talked about the concerns that we'd had with traffic, and I know he has expressed that he is committed to working on a solution to that region, which I think is good. And we'll continue to keep the lines of communication open.
Was it a cordial conversation? You said he was direct.
Oh, no, entirely cordial, of course. No. Have you talked to Steve Wynn?
I've never talked to Steve Wynn.
It's great. When you talk to him and you're put on hold, there's the music playing in the background, but it's actually Steve Wynn's voice talking about some other. It's interesting when you if you have a chance to call him.
Maybe I'll give him a call right after this. It's just worth making the call.
He's got a great voice for radio. That's not to say it wouldn't be great on TV, but he's got a great voice.
An endorsement of Steve Wynn's voice for radio. All right.
His voice.
I got it. Turning to another putative vice, you're opposed to the legalization of marijuana for adult recreational use in Massachusetts. I received some reader questions about this on your stance. What quantitative data informs your opposition to legalization for recreational use?
Well, let me sort of provide a little bit of context to this. I'm somebody who supports medical marijuana. I supported the decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana. Where I draw the line, though, is for full legalization. We've got legalization playing out right now in states like Washington State and Colorado, and I just don't see the benefit in us rushing into it here in this state. Let's see how things go there. Let's see what the impact is. Let's see what the issues are. There are issues already because certain prohibitions under federal law that make it complicated in terms of the state dynamic. In terms of quantitative analysis, I'll tell you one thing that I'd like to learn a lot more about, and I think the public should learn a lot more about. It's the health effects, particularly on young people. A lot of people may be under the impression that today's marijuana is what they were smoking back in the 70s or 80s. It's not, folks. It's manufactured in a very sophisticated way, and I think we ought to understand the implications of today's TCH levels and the like as we go forward, particularly as they affect young people, which really is my concern with this. Old people, you can get yourselves in all sorts of trouble, but it's the young people who are going to experiment and want to try things, and I think we should be really careful about that. And again, don't rush. Let's see how things go and take it in course. I know it's on the ballot. We'll see what voters do in terms of first collecting signatures and then what happens next fall.
If it does end up making the ballot, Mayor Marty Walsh of Boston has said he'd be willing to be out front campaigning against a legalization measure. Would you?
Well, I think, look, the mayor, I think, brings certainly his own experience and a particular authority to this issue. We're both focused on issues of addiction right now and the heroin and opioid crisis that is just ravaging families and ravaging the state. And, I completely understand where he's coming from. And, as I say, I'm somebody who doesn't support full legalization right now.
But would you be out front campaigning for it? Would you show up with him at an event? Should it make the ballot in opposition to?
It's hard to predict I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow or next week or what issues will be before us. In all seriousness, did anybody think of DraftKings, a couple months ago? I certainly didn't think that heroin or opioids would be top on our docket as they are. So, I think we'll see how things go. It's obviously something I'll continue to pay close attention to.
I want to turn to heroin and opioids. Obviously been... Would you say that's the thing you focused the most amount of your attention to since you become Attorney General?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've read through your report. How responsible do you think drug companies are, the drug companies that make these extremely powerful opioid prescription drugs, for the crisis of overdoses in Massachusetts?
Well, I'll tell you something. When Purdue Pharma first marketed OxyContin back in 98, 99, they marketed it as non-addictive. And if you tell me I can't say exactly how responsible they are, but I'll tell you this, Josh. We are 5% of the world's population, and yet we consume 80% of the world's opioid supply. 80%. Those of you watching TV, you see the prevalence of advertising and the marketing out there. Why is that concerning that we consume 80%, or the fact that prescriptions have risen exponentially in the last 15 years? It's because what we see here in Massachusetts is that 4 out of 5 of our heroin users today started with painkillers, started with pills. So I think there is responsibility there. I think it's one of the reasons why our office is, among other things, looking at some of the sales and marketing practices of pharmaceutical companies.
Do you expect to go after those companies?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that, we are in such a dire state right now. We need education, we need intervention, we need treatment, we need pharmaceutical companies to step up and be part of the solution. We need prescribers to make sure that they are engaging in safe prescribing practices. I can't tell you how sick and tired I am. Just yesterday, every day I'm with families and I'm with people who talk about going to the doctor, going to the dentist, and being sent home with a script for a bottle of pills, even when they say no thank you, because the message is starting to penetrate that these are, dangerous. Even when they're saying no, they're told oftentimes, just take it in case you need it. And that's just not where we need to be. I think we're a heavily pill-dependent culture, and we really need to shift the lens on that. I think we need to work with doctors and the health community, and I spoke the other day to the Mass Medical Society, and we've been working with them, giving doctors and dentists and others additional tools. What are alternatives to pain management right now? 15, 20 years ago, we all got by on something else. What are other approaches that we can avail ourselves of? I think that's important. I think working with insurance companies around some of the coverage issues and making sure that there is a way to get reimbursement for some of those alternatives is important. We have a shortage of behavioral health specialists right now in the state. People who can be on the front lines to help people with recovery. We need to work on that. We secured an agreement recently with the maker of Narcan. So important we get Narcan in the hands of first responders at a cost-effective price.
This is the opioid overdose sort of reversal drug.
Right. It's a Band-Aid, but it's an important Band-Aid because it stops an overdose from turning into a fatal overdose, and it's proven to be so effective. So, there's so much we need to do. Increasingly, I'm of the view, Josh, though, that we really need to talk to people. And I spend a lot of time talking about this to protect yourselves and your kids and your families. Ask questions when you go to the dentist or the doctors if you're being prescribed painkillers. Make sure you go through your medicine cabinets in your house or your parents' house and get rid of, through a safe disposal, maybe at the police station, any medication that you don't need. But it is just so heartbreaking, and every day I hear stories from a mother or a father who've had to quit work to take care of their sick son or daughter. People of all ages, all races, ethnicities, socioeconomic backgrounds, people who never ever could have imagined that they'd find themselves in this space. The average age of an overdose in our state right now is 40, which tells you a little something about the demographic. And I've sat with mothers who lost, vibrant college juniors who never thought this was going to happen. I've talked to people in recovery who struggle because you have to realize this is something that, it takes time. But it could be somebody who injured themselves at work, fell off a ladder. It could be somebody who injured themselves playing sports. And in no time, because of the power of these drugs, found themselves addicted and then moved to heroin as things became more expensive. Heroin's so cheap now. So it is a focus. I talk a lot about it. It is the top priority because I know how devastating it is to families across the state.
Just to circle back to the question, though, you said that the drug companies that make these opioids bear some responsibility. Did you say you were looking into marketing practices?
No, we are.
What does that involve?
Well, look, I think that, I recognize that, and I represented pharmaceutical companies in a prior life. There is tremendous innovation, particularly in this area with health sciences and biotech, and I have deep regard and deep respect for the technologies and what they enable. I'm also not looking to cut off anyone's access to needed pain medication, but I do think that we ought to take a hard look at certain things. Why is it that the FDA just approved Oxy for children? What does that say? What does that do? What kind of controls, what kind of real look is going on in terms of the safety and the efficacy when you compare that and you weigh that against how devastating these drugs are? And so,
well, take that example. What can you do as Attorney General to push back against it?
Well, unfortunately, I like to think we can do a lot. I don't think we can control the FDA. An ex-president might. But that's important. We can band together and be advocates and exhort the FDA and those at the federal level to look at those things. But here we are taking a look at a variety of aspects of things, as I mentioned, from prescribing to insurance coverage to what can we do as a state in making a more robust program to monitor the prescribing and dispensing of drugs. And this is something that I've worked really closely with Governor Baker and Secretary Sutters and their team on. And I think they've done a great job and are making strides, but we have a lot more work to do.
I'm going to ask you a criminal justice question. The House today moved your bill, which creates the crime of trafficking in fentanyl, which is that synthetic opioid that's a lot more powerful than morphine. It would effectively boost the maximum penalty for trafficking from 10 to 20 years. And I'm wondering, what will a 20-year penalty do that a 10-year penalty doesn't already do?
Well, what we found is that increasingly in our investigations, heroin was turning up, but a new form of drug was turning up, fentanyl, which is made by the drug cartels and is 50 to 100 times more potent than heroin. And it looks like heroin. People may buy it thinking it's heroin. Heroin was cut with fentanyl as well. And it's incredibly dangerous, incredibly deadly. What we also realized, though, is that there was no crime against selling it or trafficking it. There's crimes against trafficking in marijuana or cocaine or heroin, but here we have this incredibly potent, dangerous drug for which there is no crime. So we propose legislation to make it a crime. I'm glad it moved out today because it's important that we have that tool, and it would allow a charge of up to 20 years. I think it sends a signal about how serious this is because there is no common low-level user distributing fentanyl out there. This is a calculated and deadly decision by drug cartels who are making fentanyl and bringing it into our state and into our communities with the sole purpose of of getting it to those who are incredibly vulnerable and in search of a need to feed their addiction.
But what would 20 years do that 10 years wouldn't? I mean, statutorily now there's no crime against trafficking, but you can still get a penalty of 10 years in jail, prison.
Well, look, I mean, you have to. One thing that's important is talking about always having an ability to assess size. You know, there are some operations where there is a ton of fentanyl, and there are other operations where there's a lesser amount of fentanyl being trafficked. And I think it's appropriate that a court or that we would have the discretion to make an appropriate sentence recommendation that's consistent with the amount.
One more question on the opioid epidemic. The state Senate's effort to mandate that schools verbally screen 7th and 10th graders for potential drug use. What do you think of that effort, and how do you balance some of these efforts to stop the scourge of opioid overdose with civil liberties?
Well, I think that it's just a piece of the puzzle, and I think the Senate and the legislature has made a lot of strides, and they've been doing a lot of work looking at any number of new policies and ways to get at this issue, from expanding treatment options to education options to work around insurance. And on this particular issue, you know, my mom's a school nurse. And I know that school nurses are on the front lines. They see what's happening to young people. They know a lot of times it's the school nurse to whom a young person goes when they're bullied, when they're hungry, when there's an issue at home. And so I think that there is nothing wrong with giving the healthcare professional who, in that school setting, they're charged with the care and the well-being and the custody of children during the day to ask questions that are appropriate about their health. And I'm sure there are ways that if there are parents who don't want their children asked those questions, we already have similar protections in place if that's really an issue. But, you know, based on what I see, Josh, and the parents that I speak to, they are scared to death. They are scared to death right now of what's going to happen to their 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old with this crisis. And I think most parents will want to do everything they can to protect their children, and we all should work together to do just that. So I don't think it's actually as much of a problem as people may have sort of thought it would be.
Okay, I want to turn to something else pretty grim, which is a lot of the terrible cases that DCF, the state's Department of Children and Families, involving the death and injury of children under the watch of DCF. Individual district attorneys tend to investigate those tragedies, but since the agency is statewide, and there's sometimes similarities in some of these cases, do you think the Attorney General's office should take over some or all of the investigations into deaths of children under the watch of DCF?
You know, I think that the district attorney's offices have been doing an excellent job with their investigations and review. I don't see a particular need for that to happen. What I do think is important, though, is that our office be a partner and be another participant, working with the administration, working with other agencies, working with district attorneys, working with the healthcare community, social workers, in supporting children and families, and certainly doing everything we can to protect young people. And that's where we've been on this issue. We're here to support. We're here to help. You know, there's nothing more fundamentally important than, I think, from a government's perspective, than looking after and making sure we're doing everything we can to protect young people.
Question on energy. The Baker administration has opened the door to the state's electric utilities, more or less charging their customers for natural gas pipeline development, sort of as a pass-through. I'm curious on your thoughts on that. Is that good for consumers?
Well, this is a really important issue, and I know the governor has spoken at length about this issue, and you know, there's a reason for that. I mean, we live in an area where there are high energy costs, whether you're a homeowner, and here we go, we're about to have winter upon us. I hope it's not like last winter.
Me too.
But for you know, for consumers, for businesses, for households, energy costs are a big issue. That said, you know, we got to be smart about how we approach that issue. And I'm somebody who advocates getting as many different energy sources into this market as possible. So whether it's gas or hydro or solar or other renewables, energy efficiency. This is where we need to be. It's important that we have what we call a diverse fuel mix, so that we're not too weighted in one direction or another. And we're currently doing a look at that in our office. Our office wears a few hats, but one of the things we're responsible for is being the ratepayer advocate and making sure that we understand we're there to fight for consumers and ratepayers and make sure that that there aren't needless costs passed on to them, whether they're for executive compensation or whether they're for the building out of infrastructure. We want to know what that money's going to and how it's going to affect the bottom line in people's households and around the kitchen table.
Turning to something more political, you mentioned the governor. You've left the door open to running for higher office, but in April on television, you absolutely ruled out running in 2018 when Charlie Baker is expected to run for re-election. I just want to clarify this. You're open to running for a higher office down the line, but you absolutely, positively, irrevocably, indubitably rule out running for governor in 2018? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Easy enough.
I love my job. Look, I ran to do this job. I was serious. I want to do this job. I ran for this job. This is the job I want to do. I've taken to it. I like it. I like it a lot, and I just want to try to do a good job with it. So it's as simple as that. I know the questions get asked more by the media than by people, actually, and I understand that. And I'm not slamming you. That's not
no offense taken.
But part of it is, I think, I hope there isn't a cynicism out there that you run only to run for something else or do something else. I mean, I just want to do what we're doing.
It might be historical. Frank Bellotti, Scott Harshbarker, Tom Riley, Martha Coakley, they all ran for governor and lost. Actually.
Well, that settles that.
So you're not the person to reverse the curse?
I fancy it, yeah.
Okay. I want to turn to another hardball topic, and that's your college years. And I want to ask you both about, well, first about your hairdo there. Was that?
Where do you want to start?
Look
at those pearls.
Let's start at the top.
That was really popular, that pearl look with the turtleneck.
Pearl turtleneck, 1992.
1992, yeah.
You were part
And I had a perm. A perm. Do you remember those? They were popular.
What was Project Hand? It says here in your yearbook photo that you were involved with Project Hand.
I think that was housing and neighborhood development. I think, that's what that was about. And, it's one of those, you're in college. It was an effort. You could tutor kids or get out in the neighborhood, play basketball, do different things. I'm pretty sure that's what that was about.
Tell me about the journey from Hampton Falls, New Hampshire to Harvard.
It's about 55 minutes.
More metaphysically than that, I think, was my question.
Route metaphysical, travel down Route 1 through Saugus into that's.
Were you recruited for basketball?
Yeah, I was recruited. I was recruited by a lot of schools, and I can't believe you chose that picture, Josh. Jesus, there had to be. You went out of your way to find.
No, that was just the one easily available.
That's good. At least I'm drilling with my left hand. I grew up in a small town, Hampton Falls, right over the border, right on by Hampton Beach, and it was a great place to grow up. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and basketball was a big part of my life, and so I was recruited to play ball. And really, what ended up happening is I had an opportunity to go to Harvard, play Division I. It was close to home, close to my family, and I thought it was a good fit. So I made the trip, and it was wonderful because my family used to get in. They used to be able to get to games, and it was great.
You did very well on the court. How did you do in school?
Just fine.
Yeah.
I graduated.
That is after all the final metric.
Yeah, no, I did well in school. I did just fine in school. I wish, now you're 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. You're not paying attention. You wish now you could go back and study all the things that you'd want to study. But I had a great time with it. It was a great place to go to school. Made a lot of friends. There's a real cross section there, and had a great experience.
In 1992, when you graduated, you then went to play professional basketball in Austria.